Very good morning, everyone. As we take this, the 10th of October, to increase our awareness and understanding of mental health, I welcome our panelists and viewers on this discussion on mental health based on the theme for this year 2021, which is mental health in an unequal world. The World Federation for Mental Health has announced the theme as mental health in an unequal world, considering its relevance for the day. In a world that is increasingly polarized and segregated, with the wealthy becoming wealthier and the number of people living in poverty increasing by the day, the inequalities can come in the form of race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender identity, socioeconomic inequalities, and the list goes on. Such inequalities have definitely had a strong impact on the mental health of all. The theme thus highlights the accessibility and the possibility of institutional changes in the way mental health care works. We all have a role definitely to play in these disparities and ensure that each individual gets the experience of living a healthy mental health life, fully integrated in all aspects of functioning. To give us more knowledge and their expert opinion on the topic, we have with us three very accomplished panelists. Our first panelist for today is Dr. Ravichandra Karkal. Dr. Ravichandra Karkal is a consultant psychiatrist and psychotherapist providing comprehensive and humane care with the right balance of medication and psychotherapy. He's trained at reputed institutes, which includes having gained his MBBS from Mysore Medical College and Research Institute and his MD in Psychiatry from Central Institute of Psychiatry, Ranchi. He is also an associate professor of psychiatry at Yenapoya University, Mangalore, and engages in education and research. He has a decade of experience in managing psychiatric disorders from children and adolescents to adults and elderly individuals. A warm welcome to you, sir.
Thank you, Benzeta, for that gracious introduction.
Welcome, sir. Our second panelist for today is Dr. K.T. Shweta. Dr. K.T. Shweta is the founder and director of Anirveda Resource Center for Psychological Wellbeing. She has been practicing as a consultant psychologist at various hospitals, rehabilitation and counseling centers. She is also a guest faculty for several bachelor's and master's courses in psychology. Child mental health and parent education has always been an area of concern, as she firmly believes it is one area that requires a lot of attention in today's lifestyle. Her center, Anirveda, is a fully fledged center that works towards positive mental health through therapy, education, and training. Welcome to you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Benzeta.
Our third panelist for the day is Mr. Akshara Damble. Mr. Akshara Damble is a TEDx speaker and a psychologist based out of Bengaluru and has worked with clients across the globe. He is an expert in establishing harmony at different levels, namely personal, family, and workplace. Through his institute, Mano Samvada, he has been able to create an impact and bring transformations at individual and group levels across the various sectors of society. He has also been felicitated with the Social Impact Corona Warrior Award 2020 by Smriti Sadhana Foundation, Bengaluru. Welcome to you, sir.
Thank you so much.
It definitely is a privilege to have all three of you today here discussing a very relevant and eminent topic that requires more education than ever with the times we are now facing. So without further ado, let us dive straight into it. To begin with, Dr. Ravichandra Karkal, let me address this first and most pressing query to you. What significance does the theme for the current year, mental health in an unequal world, hold in today's situation?
Yeah, Benzeta, thank you for having me on this panel today. So let me give you an example. Imagine there is a 100-meter race, okay? And, everyone, all the participants in the race are not on the same line. If one of them is asked to take 2 steps backwards from the starting line, another person is asked to take 5 steps backward. Maybe some of them may, be 50 steps backward or 100 steps backward from the starting point. And we expect all these participants to do their best and, come first in the race. So as you can see, if Usain Bolt also is starting 100 steps behind from the starting line, maybe he will not be, as successful as he is now. So with this example, I want to highlight that all of us in our life's race sometimes have certain constraints. They may be social, they may be economic, they may be familial constraints. For example, if somebody has been, brought up in a state of poverty, or if a child has experienced adverse mental health, events like having seen domestic violence at home, or having parents who use substances like alcohol or cigarettes or cannabis, or if they have if there is marital discord at home between parents, or if a person is coming from a marginalized community like a LGBT community, or if you are an immigrant in a country, all these things basically put you few steps backward from the starting line, and you cannot expect all of them to do similarly in everything in life, in the roles that they play, in the responsibilities that they have in life. We cannot really expect that they will be able to do 100%. Of course, this does not apply to everyone. There will be some people among these who are very resilient and who do well despite all their setbacks that they have faced in life. Another thing is, there is one quote that goes around that COVID is a great equalizer. Of course, coronavirus does not know any boundaries. It does not really see which country you are from, or which race you are from, or which religion you are from, or which socioeconomic class you are from. But the pandemic has not affected all of us equally. For example, during the first lockdown, some of us were busy, perfecting our Dalgona coffee or the special fluffy cake, whereas there were immigrants who were traveling thousands of kilometers barefoot to go to their homes from metropolitan cities. So there were people who were running around hospitals to get a ventilator bed. You cannot really say that COVID is a great equalizer. The pandemic has deepened inequalities among us, be it the digital divide, which has put a lot of students, in a position where they are not able to access education, be it businesses like restaurants or tourism industries where they were literally shut down, and all people who were involved had enormous setbacks in their life. So, and not everyone has this luxury of sitting at home and working, right? So all these things definitely have created a lot of inequalities in today's day and age. Also, access to healthcare services, and especially mental health healthcare services, is very, very divided and very bleak. If you think of our country, there are only maybe 20-30,000 mental health professionals in total, right? And for a lakh population, there may be less than half of a psychiatrist, if you see statistics, right? So there is such a dearth of access to mental health services. So, and also COVID has caused disruption in every health service as well as mental health service. So all these things have, really created a whole set of complex problems during this COVID pandemic, Benzita. So hope
Yes.
that.
Yes, sir. Yes, thank you. That was definitely a very brilliant analogy. It truly speaks about the depth and the reach through which we have all suffered, and definitely has not been an equal plate of suffering for us all. So yes, thank you, sir. That definitely puts highlights the theme for the year. Yes. Continuing with the same theme, I think one strong theme that is reflected when we say mental health in an unequal world is that we are actually stressing a lot on inclusivity and mainstreaming. So I think I would give this question to Dr. Katie Shweta. As a center that works for well-being in all groups, and with mental health in an unequal world being discussed, do you think this is a good time to reflect on what are these groups that actually need a lot of focus, and what are the marginalized groups of mental health care, ma'am?
Yeah, thank you so much, Benzita, for the question. I'm looking at it, the same question, in two ways. One aspect of inclusivity. What I feel is, see, Dan speaking about, great levels of inclusivity, or like, having a place where, if you're talking about children, a school where there is inclusivity or a center there where there is inclusivity. What I think is we'll have to sit and reflect on, making inclusivity a part of everyone's daily life. Smallest of the examples being, see, let's not give them stairs when they come to a shopping mall, or let's not be like, no, my child is not going to play with a child who is of special needs or a disabled child. So I think if each one of us start with inclusivity within our own, self, our small family and our friends group, I think that is where inclusivity begins from, and that can actually lead to greater reforms being brought, like having a resource center or something like that. Because I feel like sir said, working at that level requires a lot of expertise. We do not have enough trained professionals. Even if we have resource centers or inclusive schools like that, having establishing those community resources is a long way to go. But where we can start at is letting our kids volunteer at a center for special needs, or being okay with them using an elevator with us. Or many of these parents don't get these children out fearing those stairs and kind of laugh, or the way people look. So I think that part, if we start at, or even having a person having a mental health diagnosis at work with you, because a lot of people go through major mental illnesses, but this reintegration back to the society becomes very, very difficult for these people because of stigma attached to having a mental health diagnosis. So I feel inclusivity should start from there. We feel where we start thinking, okay, they need to be a part of wherever they belong to. So I think we should start from there. And one more thing, what I'm looking at is, the need for cutting down these frameworks or references that we have about different things. Like, for example, boys should not cry, or, things like that, wherein people are more open to talking about, things, or for, normalizing mental health concerns, like I feel low, or I'm not. We have these ideas, a lot of these ideas, like, if you are very happy and you're walking around, you may not be depressed. Maybe he's just talking. How can he comes for work, reports for work every day? How can he be suicidal? So I think, getting yourselves along, understanding these, everyday things, all of those should start off, and that can actually make a big difference in, everyone's lives. Yeah, Ben.
Thank you, ma'am. It's definitely a hard pill to swallow, because when we speak about inclusivity and mainstreaming, we kind of look at the professionals and the institutes. But when someone, comes back and tells us mainstreaming will work if everyone who's there in the mainstream works, that definitely means each of us have to put in something and see that it how occurs. It's not going to be inclusive if you don't include. So definitely thank you for those well put points, ma'am. Yes. Moving on, I think since we've highlighted on the theme and the inclusivity, we can also see that at least in the last 2 or 3 years, the recent trend has been social media has been very awoken with mental health, and that has translated to a lot of corporate places also including these concerns into their structure. And with these, we see that a lot of workplaces and communities are making an attempt to reach out and accommodate this. However, having worked, Mr. Akshara Damble, sir, having worked in different settings and structures, where do you feel we are in accommodating people in public spaces or ventures, or even in structures, in private structures or public structures? Where do you think we have reached in this accommodation?
Well, it's very important question, and I will answer it in a couple of parts, because when we look at corporate sector, or when we look at workplace in general, we have to see it in multiple dimension, because we have very small companies, small organizations, to medium level organizations, and then going to multinational companies. Now, when COVID had hit and all the companies were shut, the first question was, or the companies, most of the companies said that let's cut down all the L&D budget, because they said now people are working from home. That is what they all wanted, because especially in the places like Bangalore, people always thought working from home is a very fancy thing. But when it became a normal thing, that is when people started seeing the difficulty of it. How difficult it is to really bring a balance in the work and life when you're actually working from home. So that is where the challenge came. And that is when organizations started thinking what is really happening. And because of work from home, a lot of companies started putting more pressure on the employees. So now you can log in at 8 o'clock because you do not have travel time, and you can still continue to work till 8 p.m. in the night because again you do not have to travel. So companies started utilizing this time for their benefit, and unfortunately the employees started getting more and more disturbed, stressed, and again they were helpless in the sense they cannot say that I cannot work because they have been given the benefit of working from home, even in the name of COVID. So that is where the challenge was. However, there are many organizations which have become more sensitive. There are many leaders in the organizations who have become sensitive to the mental health aspects because they themselves started realizing that it is a big task to work from home. It is a big task to connect with people through Zoom. It is a big task to stay online all the time. So then some of the organizations have actually started taking up mental wellness session or other wellness session. In fact, they are promoting yoga sessions, they're promoting breathing exercises, relaxation exercises, some wellness talk, how they can take care of their health in general, because many people have become totally, they have stopped exercising, gyms were closed. So all these things have started taking up importance, which is a very good thing because while we are working very well, while we are earning very well, it is also important for all of us to take care of our health equally. And hence, I think it's a very positive step in general. However, I also see that a lot of startups, a lot of small scale companies are still not really bothered about their employees. And because of excess of human resource or lack of job opportunities, a lot of employers are utilizing this for their benefit by saying, okay, if you cannot work, if you feel stressed, then you can leave the job. We have somebody else to replace you. So this is another threat. So a lot of people are also going through this threat of possibility of losing the job. So I think this is a very wide area to speak, but to sum up, I think there are many positive changes, many positive steps that have been taken. However, a long way to go.
Yes, thank you, sir. I think, like you said, it will definitely go on an individual to individual basis with each organization. And while it is nice to see steps are being done, we also cannot lag behind. There definitely can a lot more work to be done. I think, like how Dr. Ravichandra said, they are all at different starting points, and to get them there, it will take a long time. So we see that the theme is relevant in a lot of areas. It is not restricted to just a clinical setup or just disability. It is deep rooted in our daily living in a wide range aspects than we can see. Most of the times, mental health almost becomes like an invisible barrier that is there. It is there like the air. You don't know where it impacts or where does it impact end. So moving on, I think like most of you highlighted, the last 2 years, the pandemic has been our reality. There has been no reality outside the pandemic. And along with that, I think you could say that mental health has been one of the most severe invisible victims. You don't directly connect to it. It might not be the most visible necessity, or it might not be the most concrete essential that we require, but its impact has nonetheless been severe. Looking at the pandemic, a few questions that I would like to ask you all. Again, Dr. Ravichandra, what are the changes we have seen in the mental health care facilities and services during the pandemic, and what do these changes signify with regard to people reaching out, or even the facilities that we can provide? What is happening, and what can this tell us of the future?
You have rightly put it. The COVID-19 pandemic, when it hit us, I think there was a clear awareness at various levels, that basically this will have simultaneous mental health pandemic also. So it is going to have wide range of mental health effects. And I think, lot of people have become more aware of this aspect of their life. As Akshara was saying, working from home, they thought that it would be a fancy thing, but eventually when they had to do it, the pressures that come with it, I think it was a big realization for a lot of people working from home. And of course, people who lost their jobs or who did not have means to earn their daily wages, right? So it has caused wide economic disruption. So all these things have led to rise in stress, anxiety, depression, and also not only these symptoms of various disorders, but clinical disorders also, like severe disorders where it has even led to rise in suicides during this COVID-19 pandemic. And one positive change that I can see in how mental health care services are delivered is adoption of teleconsultation by our clients and patients. I think before the pandemic, we wouldn't have imagined that you would just open an app and select which doctor you want to speak with, and or which psychologist you want to have a therapy with, and just go ahead with the consultation. It was unimaginable for most of us before, although these services were there from quite some time. I think we as clinicians, we as mental health professionals also were not very keen in adopting this, because change always is very difficult in the beginning, and patients really did not have an idea about how easy it is and how it sort of takes away those barriers which can come in the way of mental health care service delivery, right? Because coming to a hospital, you have this sort of stigma that, okay, people are there, they will notice that I am here. I may just come across some of my relative. What will I tell him? Why am I here? So all those barriers, I think it definitely eased a lot of those barriers. So the adoption of teleconsultation and delivery of mental health care services through various smartphone applications, I think that was one big change that the COVID-19 pandemic has sort of catalyzed. These were there, but it definitely sort of accelerated this process logarithmically, I feel. That is one big change. Another thing is at the government level also, in last year, I think they released a helpline called as Kiran. Basically, this is the first national mental health helpline, basically. So it addresses various aspects like, screening for disorders, suicide prevention, psychological first aid, crisis management, rehabilitation, providing information on disabilities and what can be done for people with disabilities. So such a comprehensive helpline, I think it was only possible because people, higher up understood that if we don't do something about the mental health pandemic, it is going to lead to wider consequences, and it will eventually affect each one of us. Mental health is everyone's business. We cannot say that it's just mental health professionals' business or just the government's business. We cannot really say something like that. And if you think of clients who have consulted us or who have been seeking help, initially it was this fear of contracting disease because it was a very novel thing. There were no treatments available, vaccines were not available, but slowly the fear dissipated, and then the realization of the economic consequences and all the problems that came with it, I think that hit us hard. And definitely it has increased the rates of mental health problems. So there are positives, definitely. It has created some amount of awareness at various levels. People are more ready to access mental health care services. But it's, handling this whole mental health pandemic, I think it will take probably decades, right? We are still slowly realizing the consequences of all the complexities of the pandemic, right? So
Yes.
it's a long way to go, Benzita. Yeah.
Yes, yes. Yeah, I think like you said, necessity has definitely been the parent for change. And I think like you rightly pointed, even as professionals, we stayed away from technology, could be our ideas and all of it. And now there is no way. The demand for help is very severe, and we have to access every possible resource that we have. Yeah, definitely not how we would have wanted things to turn out this way, but it has given us a lot of work, but also quite a bit of resources. And I think, like you pointed out, the bureaucratical changes are happening. It could be the policies, And it could also be a lot of talk about who can do what services and how to get them, what more structures need to happen. I think that talk was definitely fueled by the changes we saw in the pandemic. Yes, yes, thank you so much, sir. Yeah. And I think along with mental health, the one field that got severely hit was education. I still remember the exams were all preponed in March, and that one set of students were like, we will get done. You all will be stuck with the exams. And that last one English exam that was cancelled, once that English exam in March 2020 got cancelled, education did not remain the same. We have seen monumental, unprecedented. We were fighting against the NEP and had a lot of reservations. And now NEP seems to be the least of our concerns. So with the almost 2 years of quarantine learning, parent teaching, and all of this, we are now slowly opening schools in India and getting back to it. So yes, Dr. Shweta, what do you think we can expect of children? What is their psychological well-being or condition when we welcome them back into our schools? I think we should definitely be ready for changes and not just expect them to get back in line. So what do you think we can expect when we are slowly opening schools and telling come back?
Yeah, that's a very nice question, Benzita. Probably all of us would agree that we have already started seeing references like this, wherein, parents have come or teachers have come or kids have come and told that, things have not been the same. It's getting difficult right now. Now, going back 2 years back, when this, suddenly the lockdown came up, all of us, including the kids, suddenly thought that this is going to be a short-term enjoyment period for all of us. So let's make the best of the lockdown period that we have had. So we made great plans, and none of us knew that the next 2 years would be something totally out of control. And probably, one of the most difficult things in the entire pandemic was to function in a situation about which we have no control at all. None of us knew what's happening the next day. So every day we function. And I think that's one of the most difficult situations. And when we have to, what makes things very difficult is we'll have to function in an unpredictable situation. So years of, highly disciplined way of functioning, of having a wake up time, going to school, listening to a 40 minutes lecture, making notes, having an examination, studying, preparation, all gone over to sitting in front of the laptop, listening to a class, looking for network more than looking for notes, looking for the best Wi-Fi brand that's available. And all of those became the trend. Then calling something as the new normal, and having a set of parents who were confused as at one point of time, we were not letting them use the phone. Now we are telling them, see the phone, have it, keep it. What are we doing? So now parents coming and telling us, ma'am, now the school is beginning, but they're still on the phone. What do we do? Like just recently, I had this one parent who asked me, ma'am, I know that the schools have started. He has started going back to school. Will the third wave come? If it will not come, I'll take the phone back from him. So it's all a new set. So we are going back to, coming to schools. See, one thing, things are going to get difficult for our kids as well as for teachers, because the way of teaching or reaching out to children has changed. The way of children connecting to us and their methods of learning has also changed. Like earlier, if children were writing down class material, now they have ended up recording sessions or just reading it up from the phone. So things have changed. We actually don't sit up on a chair and listen to a 40-minute lecture anymore. Children are either on the sofa or sitting wherever they are convenient and listening to a class. So a lot of things have changed. So when they come back, it's going to be difficult for both. So we can definitely expect that a lot of children have issues with attention. A lot of children will definitely have difficulties in focusing and sustaining, the material that has to be learned. Sitting and writing is going to get a little difficult. Coming to, if we have to divide it across age groups with very little children, socializing is going to be difficult because they've never had that at all, right? Ever since they had to go to school, they have been there in the pandemic situation. They've never seen a nursery. So suddenly go out to a nursery. So they will have socialization difficulties. They'll have this, big issues with separation from parents, because we have clinged on to parents playing this dual role of being a teacher and a parent. with coming to middle school and high school children, most of their adolescent crisis, they have finished it within the house. So now slowly moving out, getting to know how my adolescents work with the peer group and the adults outside. This is going to be an issue. With college students, the whole way around of, I've changed my entire way of writing examinations to sitting for a 1 hour lecture. Oh, now I can't get up and walk around when I'm bored. I'll have to keep looking and I'll have to keep myself confined at the place, my table, chair, etc. And even for the teachers, connecting, earlier it was just a device and a laptop. Now we go back to keeping all 50, 60 students within our attention, being able to focus on all of them, rework on our earlier methods of teaching and learning. Will come back. What I would kind of recommend to all of them is to give each of us that space, because 2 years, a lot of things have changed. So don't expect that things will fall in place within a short span. It will definitely take time. So let's not hurry into getting back to things how they were. It's not easy for the students, it's not easy for the teachers, and it's not easy for the managements also, because there are a lot of things. Like even if school has started, still safety protocols need to be followed. A lot of health concerns need to be taken care of. Along with this, the host of these psychological concerns that come up with the whole change that's coming over, with getting back to our old system. So I think we all should give ourselves that space and time, and let students as well as teachers understand that it's going to take time. Let's not be very harsh on ourselves that this is how we were, this is not working this way. So let's not be harsh on ourselves. Let's give us the time to discipline or get back to that pace. I think this is what needs to be done, than kind of ending up in more trouble by trying to push ourselves really hard to what we were 2.5 years back.
Yes, I think like you rightly pointed, acceptance and accommodation needs to go a long way to get things back. And we called it the new normal, but times have changed. It might be the only normal for decades ahead, or a hybrid normal, like we have come up with new terms. So accommodating and acceptance of the kids, they might be little kids, but they are little kids with their little worlds. So accommodating to them through the years. And like you said, it's not just the students, but also the teachers' concerns that we need to see. So being aware of it, all the stakeholders, be the management, the parents, and even we as neighbors, as society, accommodating that it will take some time for things to shift into whatever new normal that we will see, is definitely a step that we all need to take, ma'am. Yes. And I think, like the two of them pointed now, and I come back to the corporates, you all have crammed decades of change in 1 year. And now we hear of people like, yes, I'm interviewing for this position. That's a permanent work from home position. Like, don't come to the structure at all. We will send you all the details. And like you said, people thought it's going to be a very fancy trip, but it is not. But I think the companies or institutions themselves have seen a lot of efficiency or positives in changing this structure and giving more importance to these hybrid work situations or work from home situations. They are seeing a lot of efficiency, but when they do this, for whatever reasons that they do, what are those psychological well-being aspects that they definitely need to take into consideration as they go with these changes, and not leave mental health behind when they make these changes? What do you think are these changes, Mr. Akshar?
Yeah, a lot of things have to be done, because definitely earlier there were specific time schedules. Say you will log in at 9 o'clock, or you will reach office at 9 o'clock. So similarly, even when they are working from home, let there be a specific time schedule to log in, and let there be some breaks in between. Say, for example, when offices were there, the tea break was very precious one for every employee, because that is the place where they would socialize. That is the place they will start talking about their personal issues, their other things, whatever is happening in the world. So now it has become so mechanical that you have a meeting at 9 o'clock, you will log in at 8:55 or 8:58 and finish the meeting, and say we only talk about the agenda and finish it off, and next meeting is already scheduled. So we have started running faster and faster without even giving space for ourselves. So organizations, whoever have given work from home, maybe it is if they have taken it as a policy of the organization, then one thing that they need to specifically mention is they can take certain breaks in between. They do not have to, or they shouldn't be expecting the employee to be available on the screen all the time. First thing. Secondly, especially when it comes to mothers, in fact, working mothers, they are also going through a lot of challenges, because on the one side, child sees the mother, but mother is not available. The warmth, the affection that a mother can give to the child when she is available to the child is absent. So one of the employees was asking this question to me, say, how do I balance between my work and my child? So I think working mothers, if they can join together and have a specific time schedule in between, because when they are at home, they do not have to depend on creche, but at the same time, say, can they take out 1 hour off between working hours for their children or for their family? So these are the things that we all have to come out, so that we can still bring some normalcy in our lives. Otherwise, it is becoming so tiring. Apart from that, once in a while, organization can also have meetups of employees so that they can gel together, because I've been hearing this complaint from many employees that whoever has got recruited, especially in the pandemic, not just the freshers, even those who are experienced but got into a new organization, they have not met their teammates. So unless you meet a person in person, you will not get that bonding, you will not be able to develop that warmth, you will not be able to develop that understanding. So I think this is another thing that also organizations have to improvise. But on the positive side, what I also see is, say, for example, I'm also working from home and I am in my native, because now all the clients, as Dr. Ravichandra was mentioning, clients have got accommodated with the online communication. So I can take sessions from even when I'm staying anywhere in the world. So that is an advantage. So what I suggest is, if youngsters or employees, especially who are simply working in the computer, they can relocate themselves to the villages so that they can have some greenery around. They can utilize their well-being, or they can take care of their well-being, because they are eating well, they are eating fresh, they can breathe fresh air. So these are some of the things that they can take care of themselves, because the organization is giving that privilege. So there are requirements from both organizational ends and individual ends, so that we can still make the space, the new idea of complete or permanent working from home, a new normal, but a better normal.
Yes, yes. And I think, like you highlighted, flexibility is something that this new structure provides. And I think we definitely need to maximize it on both the ends, the employees' requirements and the employer's requirement. And previously, like India used to have those stories where when a child reaches 10th standard, the whole family structure changes for the 10th standard students. So
Right.
now when we have a work from home employee, the whole family structure has to change. And like you said, it could be mothers or parents, or even the older generations who don't understand, you are at home, why can't you do this one thing for me? So
Right.
a lot of changing and communication. But I think one thing that you definitely highlight is flexibility is available on both the ends.
Right.
It's just that let it meet the requirements of both the parties involved. So yes, hopefully people do take up on it, and we see a lot of positive changes ahead, right? And I think since we have discussed this and we come towards the end of it, at the end, though we do it at a personal level and there is a lot of things we can do, we definitely cannot deny that policy changes, institutional changes, and changes in the structure in itself are very crucial. They are vital, and we are all doing our bits. It could be going against, helping to remove stigma, helping to remove discrimination, or helping to remove certain facilities that obstruct mental health care. We have to address this. And looking at that, a few questions that I would definitely ask is, this is to Dr. Ravichandra. we always speak about stigma and discrimination, and we say that it is the mental health professionals' duty to definitely educate. And I wouldn't deny that it's there. But I also feel that we can educate the public that when you do have stigmas or fears, what can you do about it? It is not that they do not have agency. They can reach out to us, and they don't have to reach out to us just because they have a problem. So with regard to that, what would you tell the viewers or the general public, if you have these doubts, what are the things you can actually do, not to seek mental health, but at least to get yourself educated? What are the things that you can do, and how can they clarify their doubts?
Yeah. So, of course, when we talk about stigma, it can be self-stigma. That is, the individual himself feels, ashamed or guilty of whatever emotions they are going through, right? So, for them, I would say that mental health issues or mental illness is just like any other illness, right? You need not be ashamed if your blood sugar shoots up one day to 400 or 500. You just need to seek help and take care of it, right? You need to maybe change your lifestyle and or take medications, take insulin, right? So in the same way, if you have mental health concerns, if you have mental health issues which are are in epidemic proportions at this point of time in the current world, then I think we should not be ashamed. We should not feel bad about seeking help, right? Mental illness is not a sign of weakness, right? So we need to overcome self-stigma. That is first thing. Now, stigma that one experiences from others, right? So when we talk about stigma, there are three things which are very important. One is lack of knowledge and ignorance. That can cause people to stigmatize people with mental illness, right? Another thing is attitudes about mental illness or attitudes about people who have mental illness. So what will happen is, if your attitudes are not right, then you will have prejudice, right? You think that, okay, these people are erratic who have mental illness. These are psychos. We use these labels and terms so loosely in our daily conversation also. He is an OCD, he is manic, he is bipolar. We are actually trivializing serious mental illnesses if we use terminologies like that. So our attitudes needs to change, which will definitely reduce prejudice towards people with mental illness. The third thing is our behaviors and practices, okay? Because if we have wrong behaviors and practices, it will lead to discrimination. Not giving a job to a person with mental illness, keeping a child who has disability away from your kids, as Shweta was alluding to, right? So when we talk about changing practices or behaviors, I think even policy changes needs to be happening, right? For example, a few years ago, suicide was decriminalized. Earlier, suicide was an offense. So that itself makes people with suicidal thoughts not to seek help, because they are afraid that they will be called a criminal for having suicidal thoughts. Like, who would do that, right? So, and like, for example, a few years ago, insurance companies were not reimbursing expenses, hospital expenses that people with mental illness had. So that has changed now. So there are basically, we need to drive away ignorance by awareness programs. As mental health professionals, we need to change attitudes by talking more about mental health, having more conversations about mental health. When talking about how you're feeling, or what's going on in your mind, or what kind of stressors that you're experiencing, when it becomes part of your daily conversations with your colleagues, families, friends, then I think people will have lesser shame, lesser fear of what is mental illness and what it means to go through mental health problems. So I think, and one big thing, of course, would be increasing the budget allocation for mental health. If you really look at the numbers, the peanuts for mental health, actually. So even the signature national mental health program, it may be just some less than 100 crores, for a country like ours. So that's the biggest thing that needs to happen. I think that is the first step towards reducing stigma. When we recognize that this is an important area which needs more professionals, it needs more, people need more access to get these services. So yeah, Benzita.
Yes. Thank you, sir. I think you rightly highlighted everything. The creation of a safer space, like if it's a private thing to talk about, it never reaches a public space, and that definitely leads to a lot of ignorance. Even now, I think we all get calls from our friends and relatives who ask us things, but then it always kind of ends with an ending that tells, so it will be between the two of us. And speaking about it, even in a very normal sense, is definitely not acceptable. It's something you have to speak in private or confidentiality. And I think while we do respect that, it should also become something that is very common to talk. And like you rightly mentioned, the budgeting and the importance given needs to change. And I think that kind of works like a vicious cycle. So you don't speak about it, so they don't worry about it. Because they don't worry about, no one comes to know. It's a whole cycle that we definitely need to break at some point, or else, like you said, we have to get ready for a mental health pandemic that is not going to, that we are definitely not equipped to deal with. So yes, thank you so much, sir. Yes. And I think, like sir already started, the policy changes and institutional changes, we are seeing it. We are seeing it to some small extent, but a lot more that we can hope for. So I think asking about the same changes that we hope for, Dr. Shweta, what do you think are those demands? Maybe as a government agency or even as an institution or a policy agency, that we need to demand right now to at least address the current theme of mental health in an unequal world. What are the possible changes that we should demand rather than hope or ask? What do you think are top of that list if we have to make one?
Yeah, that's something that I would want to talk about, because see, talking to a lot of parents, I do a lot of work with the children coming in here for special needs. So one thing that I've always seen is that there is a big difficulty in accessing good therapy services. So what most of these parents come and talk to me about is, we do not get therapy for different reasons. One is, geographically it's not viable. Like, there's somebody from a far off village, they say coming from there to Mangalore is a very difficult thing for us, or the charges, that they are supposed to be paying for therapy and stuff like that. So a few things that I was looking at, or even discussing with a few of, the concerned people, was, one was, if, there is any system, I think a few states have already done it, if there's some form of an insurance which covers therapy, because there are a lot of children who back out from therapy services only because they cannot afford to pay. And many a times, it's a very sad thing to say, but definitely having a child with special needs is a very expensive thing, because they'll have to meet doctors continually, seek multiple therapy services, like see a speech therapist, see an occupational therapist, have a remedial trainer, shadow teacher, and the list goes on. So if there's something that can actually, help them get these services, like have an insurance or a coverage or something that helps them get these therapy services, and even there is an amount which, people from the lower socioeconomic status, they have this pension kind of a thing which is given to the children based on the extent of disability that they have. But in the current scenario, I feel that the amount that they get is really, really small. And I do not know if, if we can kind of, like sir said, allocate more of a resource for that, because children with disability, if you look into the statistics, every state, every district, there are a lot of children. Every year when they do this door-to-door survey, we do have a list of a lot of these children. So if we can kind of work around this amount and the facilities that these children get, and something that I'm looking at is to have a resource center with good staff and infrastructure, probably in every district or taluk, where people can reach out easily. Now there are resources, there are these resource people who go and see, but the services that these children get are very, very limited. Or even not the children, even with, have a concern, you'll have to go up to Mangalore, see somebody and come back. So you have a program, like for example, a rural community health center, where there is a psychologist available, where there's a mental health consultant always available, so that people can reach out to or talk to easily. I think that's something that is needed, because look at statistics, people with mental health concerns are on the rise, but where do they go? We do not know. And many a times what happens is, they do not come back because they don't want to go that far. Okay, like I've heard a lot of people telling, yeah, there is Nimhans, there is Aish. No, but from our place to Nimhans or Aish is really far. Yeah, we know that treatment services are less there, but going there and coming in itself is a big cost. So what I feel is at this point, we'll have to look at making easy, access for mental health concerns. So there is this one place where we can go to have a financial framework wherein mental health therapy services, because even adult diseases or adult psychiatric conditions like depression or schizophrenia, these are people along with medication who also need sometimes rehabilitation, need therapy services, but most of them discontinue therapy halfway because they're not able to manage the financial requirements for therapy. So if there's some kind of a policy which helps these people to make or avail these services, that can go a long way in people seeking out for help, and we will kindly definitely see a population which was much more healthier, both with regard to children as well as with adults, emphasizing a lot more on children, because every other day I definitely have a parent or two who say that we would want to back out from therapy because we are not able to financially meet these requirements. So if that kind of a support is given either to the centers working for special needs or the government, or there is a mental health program by the government which caters to these needs, I think that is the need of the hour.
Yes, ma'am. I think sir and you both pointed out, while we do speak about mental health and what we can do, we cannot deny practical realities. Maybe we as a country are still functioning on a very sympathetic mode or very emotional mode when we speak about disabilities and mental health. But there are practical realities, and like you said, we can speak of a stipend, but it needs to meet realistic demands. We are still a service oriented sector, and we are less on our end, as professionals. So to meet that demand and also to see that it is accessible practically, not just that it exists, but can you reach there? And one of the important things that I think we always forget, or we tend to forget, is mental health care is ongoing. It is not a visit that you can go. And to meet these ongoing demands, it could be financially, it could be in terms of accessibility, and also in terms of training more professionals. The changes could go a long way in helping that out. Definitely what rightly put, ma'am. Thank you. Yes. And then Mr. Akshara, they have both spoken on what is happening on their end, and I think one very common term that we see today is I am a mental health ally. I stand by the mental health rights, and this could be social media, it could be your status. You kind of reach out, but it does bring about the question, where are you getting this knowledge from, and what do you mean by being a mental health ally? You are taking some sort of responsibilities. You're reaching out and telling at a public forum that you can reach out to me, maybe not as a professional, but I still stand by your rights. And I think we do need to educate people. It is good that they are taking a step, but it would definitely be great if they knew what they're supposed to do in that step that they have taken. So what do you feel are the responsibilities of an individual who definitely wants to support this cause?
Brilliant question, because on the one side, as Dr. Ravichandra was mentioning earlier, we are lacking with human resource in the mental health space. So there is a need for us to create many more people or many more human resource in the mental health space. But on the other side, there are many people who are saying that we stand by mental health issues, or we are there for them. But the unfortunate thing is, many a times they start putting up their philosophy, their ideology on the person who is going through it. And it becomes more problematic than becoming kind of facilitating the person to address the problem. So this is where the challenge is. So I feel this is a double-edged sword. On the one side, I also propagate that people should speak about mental health. We shouldn't be restricting it to the mental health professionals themselves. But on the other side, when I see them speaking some random things about mental health issues and without focusing on the real things, or without understanding the intricacies of mental health issues, that is when it becomes a real challenge. So I feel that whoever is ready to dedicate their time for this cause, they should go through some kind of training. They should read and understand, and at the same time they also should go through some experiential training, because mental health is not it's not easy to understand by reading alone. You need to go through it. Say, unless you have gone through a therapeutic process, you will not be able to facilitate it. So I always suggest that we can come out with some simple courses where we can train people who are really interested. Because on the other side, I also see many mental health professionals themselves, those who have got the qualification, they're not passionate about mental health. So mental health is a space where you need passion, at the same time enough knowledge and skills. So that is a good combination. So I think we should train people in terms of how they can really be facilitators, because just giving listening service may kind of give a feeling that you are empathizing with the person, but does it really solve? I really do not know. So that is where I feel that we need to create some kind of courses where we can educate people so that they can really become facilitators in the space of mental health without creating harm. Because of them, they are also creating a question on the credibility of the real mental health professionals who are qualified enough to deal with those issues. So I think that is where we need to bring a balance between the qualified mental health professionals and semi-qualified mental health professionals, and lay counselors who are just there as maybe primary point of contact.
Yes. I think that structure is something that we definitely need to develop. And I think, like you rightly said, each of us have a role to play. It is not about who is going to do a major portion or a higher portion. Each job is important, but I think it's also important to know the limitations of each job. So I think no matter how high, if we apparently do have a hierarchy, doesn't matter how higher up in the hierarchy you are, you still can't do everything. At
Absolutely.
some point you have to refer out, and that is how the whole mental health has always been, holistic structure. And I think one thing you said, training, doesn't matter where you are, for whatever amount of service that you want to give, take it as a, be it as a career or as a passion, you have to always best to get yourself trained and know it is not a personal philosophy. It is still a science. It is still based on certain researches and theoretical concepts and practical understanding. So to gain that would go a long way in helping out all the other changes. Yes. I think that has definitely been a very thorough discussion, a lot of different points coming up on a lot of different varied topics. When they said mental health in an unequal world, there have definitely been a lot of unequal topics spread out that we have to address. You don't know what to keep and what to leave out. But I think all three of you all have definitely done a truly great job in educating and giving out the most practical points. They might not be what every textbook or every essay starts with, but they're definitely something that the viewers can take home with and practice with. If you do have any concluding remarks that you would like to share, the floor is open to you all, or the screen. You all can take the screen. Yes. Yeah, either way, any one of you all could.
No, I would say that, be a buddy for somebody who is going through mental health problems, challenges, okay? Because we sometimes become bullies, and unknowingly or knowingly, we become bullies to people who suffer. So I think that's something I would like everyone to be.
Yes, definitely. That's definitely a very, very nice saying you could go home with, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, probably something to add on to what Ravichandra sir said, adding on to being a buddy. Something that I always tell, probably this is something that I've told the most ever since I started the center, is that there's so much of emphasis on our physical well-being, on our financial well-being, or our spiritual well-being. It's high time that, we start considering that mental health well-being is also as important as each of it. And let's give a little time to mental health well-being of us and the people around us. It's high time we start thinking of mental health as equal as all other health that we really work around. You go to the gym, you go to pray for yourself, you are a part of all of the Rotary, the Lions, and your social health is also taken care of. So from today, probably let's start thinking about our mental health also, and do something which enhances our mental health as well as mental health of people around.
Yes, yes. Thank you, ma'am. Yes,
Continuing from Dr. Ravichandra and Shweta, I feel collectivity is the key. As health professionals, we have to come together, and as society, we have to come together for the cause of mental wellness so that we can create a better space for everyone. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Like, since all of you all have carried forward, the chain has definitely begun. Hopefully it does spread out to a lot of them and they take the most of this program. Thank you once again to all of you all.